A forgotten medieval king built castles that stayed 20 degrees cooler in summer and warmer in winter, without fireplaces, without insulation, without anything recognizable as climate control. What he discovered hiding in plain sight made rival kingdoms desperate to steal his architects. You know what's funny about medieval castles? Everyone thinks they were these freezing, miserable stone prisons where kings and queens suffered through brutal winters and sweltering summers. Well, here's the thing. That's complete nonsense. These medieval monarchs weren't idiots shivering in drafty towers. They had tricks up their royal sleeves that would make modern architects jealous. Take King Edward I, for instance. This guy didn't just build castles to keep enemies out. He engineered them like ancient climate control systems. And the secret weapon? Walls so thick you could drive a horse and cart through them. We're talking 8 to 10 feet of solid stone in some places. Carefully Castle in Wales, some sections hit a whopping 33 feet thick. That's basically a small house lying on its side. But here's where it gets interesting. Those massive walls weren't just for stopping arrows and battering rams. They worked like the world's most expensive thermos bottle. During scorching summer days, all that stone would soak up the cool nighttime air and release it slowly throughout the day. Come winter, the same walls would trap heat from fireplaces and body warmth, radiating it back for hours after the flames died down. Makes sense, right? It's the same principle your grandmother uses when she preheats her ceramic plates before Sunday dinner. Stone holds temperature like nobody's business. Now, maintaining these behemoths was about as fun as watching paint dry on a rainy day. Crews constantly patched mortar, replaced stones, and dealt with water damage. The upkeep costs probably made royal treasurers weep into their ledgers. But comfort? These walls delivered comfort in spades. The really clever part was how they eliminated those bone-chilling drafts that could turn a pleasant evening into an Arctic expedition. Modern houses with their thin walls and fancy insulation still can't match what medieval masons achieved with pure thickness and craftsmanship. And here's something most people don't realize. These walls created natural soundproofing too. All those boisterous feast halls with hundreds of guests, musicians, and probably a few too many goblets of wine. The noise stayed put instead of echoing through every corner of the castle. But thick walls were just the beginning of these royal comfort schemes. The medieval mind was surprisingly inventive when it came to staying comfortable. They understood something we've forgotten in our rush toward modern technology. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective ones. What's even more impressive is how they combined defense with comfort so seamlessly. Every architectural choice served double duty, and the results were nothing short of ingenious. But walls were only part one of their climate control masterpiece, and the next trick involves something most people never think twice about. Picture a medieval king sitting by his massive stone walls on a scorching summer day, cool as a cucumber while his enemies sweat buckets outside. How's that possible? Well, those weren't just thick walls. They were nature's first air conditioning system. Most castle walls stretched anywhere from 8 to 33 feet thick. That's thicker than your modern McMansion is wide. But here's the kicker. All that stone acted like a giant thermal battery. During blazing summer days, those massive stones absorbed heat so slowly that the inside stayed refreshingly cool. Come winter, the walls released that stored warmth back into the rooms like a medieval space heater. Think your house has good insulation. These stone fortresses put modern homes to shame. The sheer mass meant temperature changes outside barely registered inside. While attacking armies baked in their armor, castle defenders enjoyed what felt like central air. But wait, there's more to this royal cooling trick. Let's not forget about those moats everyone thinks were just for keeping enemies out. Wrong. Medieval engineers were sneakier than that. Water surrounding a castle doesn't just stop invaders, it creates a natural cooling system through evaporation. As water turns to vapor, it sucks heat right out of the air. It's like having a giant swamp cooler, except this one also drowns your enemies. Pretty clever, right? Some crafty castle builders even redirected rivers or created artificial ponds around their fortresses. Take that modern HVAC systems. These kings were running eco-friendly climate control centuries before anyone knew what ecology meant. Then there's the brilliant window placement that most people completely miss. Those tall, narrow openings weren't just for shooting arrows. They were designed to catch and funnel breezes throughout the castle. Medieval architects understood cross-ventilation better than some modern builders. Warwick Castle, for example, positioned its windows to capture river breezes that swept through the structure like nature's own air conditioning ducts. In winter, south-facing windows trapped precious sunlight, warming rooms naturally. Window shutters let residents fine-tune their comfort level like an ancient thermostat. The fireplace design deserves special mention too. Those enormous central hearths weren't just for cooking. They heated entire sections through radiant warmth that spread through the thick stone walls. Some castles even used Roman-inspired underfloor heating systems. Imagine telling your neighbors you had heated floors in the 14th century. And here's something that'll surprise you. Those fancy tapestries hanging everywhere weren't just showing off wealth. They created an extra insulation layer against cold stone walls, trapping warm air like medieval bubble wrap. Heavy wool tapestries could weigh hundreds of pounds and provided both visual and thermal comfort. But the real genius move? The way these kings designed their towers and underground spaces to work together as one massive climate control system. Now here's where medieval architects got really clever with their window game. Those tall, narrow windows you see in castles, they weren't just built that way to keep arrows out, though that was a nice bonus. These windows were positioned like a chess master planning 10 moves ahead. Castle builders would study wind patterns around their site for months before breaking ground. Why? Because they knew exactly where cool breezes would flow during scorching summer days. Smart, right? Take Warwick Castle, for example. The builders positioned windows to catch river breezes that would sweep up from the water below. It's like having a natural air conditioning system that never breaks down or needs a repair guy who charges you a fortune. But here's the genius part. These same windows work double duty in winter. During cold months, they were angled to capture every precious ray of sunlight. Medieval folks basically invented passive solar design centuries before we gave it a fancy name and started putting it in home improvement magazines. The narrow design served another purpose too. Wide windows would let in too much heat during summer and lose too much warmth in winter. Think of it like your grandmother's house. She always knew exactly which curtains to open and when. These medieval builders had the same instinct, just carved in stone. Window shutters were the original climate control system. Thick wooden shutters could block harsh winds or trap warm air inside. Some castles even had double shutters, one set on the inside, another on the outside. That's more layers than my wife wears to a winter wedding. Cross-ventilation was their secret weapon. Windows weren't randomly placed like holes in Swiss cheese. They were strategically positioned on opposite walls to create airflow channels. Hot air would enter one side and exit through another, creating a constant breeze that would make modern HVAC engineers weep with envy. The downside? Well, medieval weather didn't always cooperate. Some days the wind would shift, turning your carefully planned cooling system into a dust collector. Other times, storms would make those narrow openings feel like wind tunnels. But most of the time, this system worked better than you'd expect. Here's something that'll surprise you. Some castle windows had adjustable stone louvers. These weren't just holes in the wall, but actual movable stone slats that could redirect airflow. It's like having a thermostat made of limestone. The height of these windows mattered too. Placed high on walls, they could catch breezes that ground-level openings would miss. Hot air rises, so positioning windows near the ceiling helped pull that stuffy air right out of living spaces, but windows were just one piece of the puzzle. The real magic happened when medieval builders figured out how to heat these massive stone structures without turning everyone into smoked ham. Now here's where medieval engineering gets really clever. These kings didn't just rely on thick walls and water features, they created what might be the world's first central heating system. And honestly, it put some modern apartments to shame. The heart of every castle was its massive fireplace. We're not talking about those cute little fireplaces you see in suburban homes today. These monsters were big enough to roast an entire ox, and often did. But the real genius wasn't in their size. It was in how they used them. Medieval builders figured out that heat travels through stone. Sounds obvious now, right? But back then, this was revolutionary thinking. They positioned these enormous fireplaces so the heated stone walls would warm adjacent rooms. The thick castle walls we talked about earlier, they became giant radiators, slowly releasing warmth throughout the day. Some forward-thinking kings took this concept even further. They borrowed an ancient Roman technique called hypocaust heating. Basically, they built hollow spaces under floors and inside walls where hot air could travel. The result was heated floors, 800 years before modern radiant heating became trendy. Talk about being ahead of your time. But managing all that heat came with serious challenges. Smoke had to go somewhere, and carbon monoxide wasn't exactly well understood back then. Castle builders became masters of chimney design out of necessity. They created complex flue systems that would make modern HVAC engineers nod with approval. The Great Hall at Borthwick Castle in Scotland still showcases one of these incredible heating systems. The fireplace is so large you could literally park a small car inside it. When it was roaring during winter feasts, the entire hall stayed toasty warm while snow piled up outside. Well, here's the funny part about medieval heating. It was all about location, location, location. The closer you sat to the Lord, the warmer you stayed. Social hierarchy literally determined your comfort level. Lower-ranking folks got the drafty seats near the doors while the king basked in fireplace glory. Some castles even had dedicated warming rooms called calefactories, basically medieval man caves where people could thaw out before heading back to their duties. These rooms were kept constantly heated and became unofficial social centers during harsh winters. The whole system required an army of servants constantly feeding wood into these hungry fireplaces. A single large castle could burn through entire forests each winter. Environmental sustainability wasn't exactly a medieval priority, but the comfort level was undeniably impressive. And the weird part is, this heating technology was so effective that many castle ruins still show scorch marks on walls from fires that burned centuries ago. Stone really does remember everything, but even the most ingenious heating system couldn't work alone. Medieval kings had another secret weapon for staying comfortable, one that combined beauty with surprising practicality. Now here's where medieval interior decorating gets absolutely brilliant. And no, I'm not talking about hanging a few family portraits. These castle dwellers figured out something that would make modern homeowners weep with envy. Those massive tapestries covering every stone wall, they weren't just showing off the family's artistic taste or latest hunting victories. They were essentially turning their homes into giant medieval sleeping bags. Genius, right? Think about it. Stone walls in winter feel like living inside a refrigerator. But hang a thick wool tapestry over that cold surface, and suddenly you've got a cozy barrier trapping warm air between the fabric and the stone. It's like wrapping your entire room in a blanket. The really clever part was how they made these textile heaters work double duty. During summer months, they'd often remove or replace tapestries with lighter fabrics, allowing the cool stone to naturally chill the rooms. Talk about seasonal decorating with a purpose. But here's the kicker. Some of these tapestries weighed as much as 3 grown men. We're talking about hundreds of pounds of wool, silk, and intricate threading hanging from medieval walls. Moving them around wasn't exactly a weekend DIY project. It required teams of servants and elaborate pulley systems just to redecorate. The psychological effect was just as important as the physical warmth. When you're surrounded by images of blazing fires, sunny meadows, or cozy feast scenes woven into the fabric, your brain starts feeling warmer. Medieval people understood something modern psychologists are just catching up to. Visual warmth actually makes you feel physically warmer. Of course, there was one tiny problem with covering your walls in fabric. Fire hazard doesn't begin to describe it. One careless candle or spark from the fireplace and your expensive insulation system could turn your castle into a medieval bonfire. Makes you appreciate modern fire codes, doesn't it? The wealthy families would rotate their tapestries seasonally, storing summer pieces in those cool underground chambers we mentioned earlier. Lighter linens and cottons for warm months, heavy wools and thick weaves for winter. They basically invented the concept of seasonal home makeovers, except theirs actually served a practical purpose beyond impressing the neighbors. Some castles had tapestries so elaborate they told entire stories across multiple panels. Walking through the halls was like reading a book, except this book was also keeping you warm and looking fabulous while doing it. Well, the smartest medieval builders didn't stop at fancy wall coverings. They looked up and realized they could turn their ceilings and towers into something even more impressive. Natural climate control systems that would make modern architects scratch their heads in amazement. Look up at any medieval castle and you'll notice something fascinating about those towering roofs and impressive turrets. They weren't just built to look intimidating or house royal bedrooms. These architectural marvels were actually brilliant climate control systems that would make modern HVAC engineers weep with envy. The secret lay in those soaring vaulted ceilings that seemed to stretch endlessly upward. Hot air rises, right? Well, medieval builders figured this out centuries before we started complaining about our electric bills. During scorching summer months, all that uncomfortable warm air would naturally drift up toward those high stone arches, leaving the living spaces below significantly cooler. It's like having a natural air conditioning system that never breaks down or needs a repair technician. But here's where it gets really clever. Those iconic towers and turrets weren't just fancy decorations for impressing visiting dignitaries. They functioned as sophisticated ventilation shafts, creating air currents that would make a meteorologist proud. Warm air would rise through these stone chimneys and escape through carefully positioned openings, while cooler air was drawn in from below. Think of it as nature's own circulation system, but with more armor and fewer moving parts. The genius extended to those distinctive conical roofs you see crowning every respectable castle tower. Sure, they looked impressive against the skyline, but their real magic happened during winter storms. Snow and rain would slide right off those steep angles faster than teenagers avoiding chores, preventing any moisture from seeping through and dropping indoor temperatures. No medieval lord wanted to deal with leaky roofs during a siege. Then there's the engineering marvel that was structural airflow. Castle builders positioned towers and roof lines to work with prevailing winds, not against them. They'd studied local weather patterns better than modern meteorologists study their radar screens. When summer breezes hit those carefully angled walls and towers, the air would be funneled exactly where it was needed most. The maintenance challenges were real, though. Keeping those massive stone structures weatherproof required constant attention. Storm damage to towers meant serious problems for the entire ventilation system. But when everything worked properly, these castles maintained surprisingly comfortable temperatures year-round. What's particularly amusing is how some of these medieval climate solutions outperform modern buildings. While we're cranking up thermostats and air conditioners, these ancient structures were passively regulating temperature using nothing but clever design and basic physics. Of course, all this sophisticated roof and tower ventilation would have been useless without proper air intake from below. That's where another ingenious medieval innovation comes into play, but this one involved going in the completely opposite direction, deep underground where the real temperature magic happened. Now here's where medieval castle design gets really clever. Underground passageways weren't just about secret escapes and dramatic castle raids. These subterranean corridors were essentially the world's first underground climate control system. And honestly, they worked better than most modern basements. Think your basement stays cool in summer? Well, castle builders figured this out 800 years ago. These underground tunnels naturally maintain temperatures around 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. That's because Earth acts like a giant thermal battery. It absorbs excess heat in summer and releases stored warmth during winter months. But here's the brilliant part most people miss. These passageways didn't just store cool air like some medieval refrigerator. They actively circulated it throughout the castle. Cool air from underground would naturally flow upward through strategically placed openings, creating what engineers today call stack ventilation. The warm air rises, cool air sinks, and boom! You've got natural air conditioning that never needs a repair technician. Medieval architects positioned these tunnels to connect with the main living areas above. Makes sense, right? During scorching summer days, servants could retreat to these cool corridors for relief. Meanwhile, the constant flow of cooler air helped regulate temperatures in the great halls and private chambers overhead. And the weird part is, these same passages helped during winter too. While they stayed consistently cool, they prevented the extreme cold from seeping up through the castle floors. Ground temperature remains remarkably stable, so these tunnels acted like thermal buffers. No frozen toes on stone floors. Let's not forget the practical genius here. Castle lords used these cool underground spaces for food storage. Before refrigeration, keeping meat, cheese, and wine at stable temperatures meant the difference between a feast and food poisoning. Some of these medieval wine cellars still exist today, maintaining perfect temperatures for aging beverages. But there was one major downside: humidity. Underground spaces naturally collect moisture, and without proper ventilation, they'd become damp, moldy disasters. Smart castle builders solved this by creating multiple air shafts and drainage systems. They learned that moving air prevents stagnant moisture better than any medieval dehumidifier could. Edinburgh Castle's underground passages remain famous for their ingenious design. Visitors today still comment on how surprisingly comfortable these tunnels feel, even during Scotland's notoriously unpredictable weather. The temperature stays remarkably consistent whether it's snowing outside or experiencing a rare heat wave. Here's a fun fact that'll impress your friends. Some castle tunnels were so effective at maintaining cool temperatures that they inspired modern geothermal heating and cooling systems. Today's ground source heat pumps use the exact same principle these medieval engineers discovered through trial and error. Well, now you know why castle life wasn't quite as miserable as Hollywood makes it seem. Between thick walls, moat, strategic windows, massive fireplaces, insulating tapestries, clever roof designs, and these underground climate systems, medieval kings lived more comfortably than most people realize.